Hi everyone, it's Janet with SugarShine Designs and welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you 5 cards that I've made with the new June Hero Arts card kit. We're going to make a fun shaker card. We're going to use a ghosting technique using distressed oxide inks and water. I have a frame style card and a couple scene cards. It's always my goal to try to show you something a little bit different from what you've seen on other artists' channels with the kit, but you be the judge. Alright, let's get started by taking a very quick look at the kit. Here it is, and of course this ribbon is wrapped around it, a very pretty blue ribbon. When you open it up, you see you have the stamp set on one side and the die set on the other, and there's always this card in between, and oftentimes you can use them in your card making, and in fact I'll show you how I did use that in one of my cards today. Now this is a great stamp set. It's got 7 sentiments, and then we've got layered items here, both water and sky. There are 3 sky elements and 1 large water element that have, depending on what it is, either 2 or 3 layers, so that's kind of fun and different. The second package has a lot of different goodies. We've got a shimmer spray, and I think what they call seafoam green, but it has a lot of gold in it, as you can see here. And then they've also sent a package of, I don't know, acrylic or some kind of rigid material of bright seashells for accents, and 4 cubes of ink. And really interestingly, they have included a very ample supply of embossing powder that resembles sand, and it's really neat. You'll get to see that as I use it making a few of my cards. Well, let's get started with card number 1. I am using a piece of alcohol ink friendly paper here, cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I've used distressed oxide inks. On one side I've put down broken china, and on the other side is faded jeans, and I will blend this together in the middle where they meet so that it is hopefully fairly seamless. When they come together they kind of form a purplish color, which I really like. On this card I'm going to use what's called a ghosting technique for using your stamps and water. So this technique uses your stamps with water, and what you do is you either spritz your stamp with water or you use a water brush like I chose to do here and apply it liberally to the stamp and then stamp that onto your distressed oxide panel. Now because distressed oxide reacts to water, it more or less fades out the area where the water touches, and so this then leaves kind of this ghosting technique or look onto your panel. This is a very soft and subtle look, but I think very effective. And since this is going to be a sympathy card with the sentiment from the kit that says with sympathy, this creates a very soft and calming appearance to your card, which I think again is really nice for the use in a sympathy card. So you can see how great that turned out. Now I'm going to use some of this seafoam spray on it. And I should mention that before I applied the adhesive, I did trim it down a little so that it would fit on an A2 size card and leave me a little bit of black border around it. Now I used a die in my stash and cut out this black stitched flag and then heat embossed that with white and used that with sympathy sentiment in the kit. There's not much more needed to finish this off, but I did use one of these blue seashells that came in the kit. They're kind of an acrylic item, and they really are pretty. Okay, on to card 2. Now I'm going to show you how I created a frame without using a die that was already pre-made for it. I do this by taking a ruler and a pencil and marking a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch line on one side, and then I use the die I'm going to cut with and rest that against the 1/2 inch line, and then continue to measure from that mark to get even borders all the way around the 4 squares. Just be consistent in how you measure, and when you get done you'll probably have some excess, which you saw I cut off of my card panel here, and then you have these great pencil lines to stage your die on and cut the 4 squares out. And this will result in a nice frame without having to buy anything special. It's always great to use what you have and not spend more than you need to. Now I'm going to show you this matte stack. It's called the Citrus Matte Stack from Die Cuts with a View. And I'm using this throughout with my cards. It always is nice when you use a card stack set because everything kind of goes together, and that's the case here. Now this brown panel in the back has pixelated dots on it, and it reminded me of sand, and that's why I chose it for the card, and you'll see why in a moment. One of the first things I'm going to do next, though, is create some of the water, which I will end up cutting out because I'm going to glue it onto my card base. But to create that, you use first the softest blue ink, and you're going to have to ink it probably several times. In some cases, I had to do it 3 or 4 times to get the coverage I wanted. And now you're seeing me do the second layering die, and the trick to the layering die is just match up the bottom like that. If you do that with all 3 pieces, you will get the look that was intended. And this is the last color, the very darkest blue. And you see it creates a really nice look. Now I'm going to show you how I did the clouds as well. I first stamped with the first main layer, and again probably stamped that 3 times at least. And now I'm going to use the medium blue to do the accents in the clouds. And I just did this and then flipped it over both times so I could make 4 pretty quickly, like so. Now you see the 4 pencil squares here. I used my frame to sketch in where my panels are going to be so that I could use them to create the scenes in these 4 individual squares. So this top one is going to be sand and water, like at the shoreline, and the bottom one is going to be a water horizon sort of scene. So I'll put that down. Then I'm going to bring in the sentiment, which is enjoy the beach life, and I'm going to stamp that with the darkest blue ink. It's a really pretty ink and a great alternative to black because it's very, very deep and very rich looking. I really like it because of that. So I'll stamp that, and I will come back to that a little later. I wasn't sure at the time if I was going to leave it alone or do something more with it. The 4th panel down here is going to be another shoreline. I first started out thinking it was going to be shoreline anyway, and then I ended up putting it wrong. So I had to quick take that off, wipe off the glue, and put it on the right way. You know, mistakes happen, but it was no big deal because I caught it in time. It didn't stick. So now I'm going to use the bird stamps that come with it. It's like these seagulls, and I'm using that granite ink from the kit to put them in. And so you begin to see kind of that horizon scene that I'm putting together, and the kind of finish that off is this really nice silhouette of a sailboat. It does not have a die to cut it out, so I just fussy cut that. And now I'm putting in footprints. These footprints are so awesome, guys. I really enjoyed working with these. They're very cute. So I put in a whole set of them, and now I'm going to use that sandy looking embossing powder and heat that, and it really creates a very interesting effect and pretty realistic to sand, other than it is shiny like all embossing powder. But it has the different colors and whatnot in it, so it's pretty cool. So anyway, I also used the beach chair, put that in, and then now I decided, after I erased all my pencil lines, that I wanted to put something else in that box with the sentiment. So I put in clouds, and I kind of trimmed them off so they wouldn't show. And interestingly enough, it ended up that it kind of looked like waves coming in. So it was sort of, again, what I call a happy accident, but I really appreciated how that actually worked out. Because there's a lot of light ink in the clouds, it actually ended up looking like foam coming up on the beach. So kind of cool effect. To finish this off, I tied a bow using the blue ribbon from the kit, and then I decided to add one more little pop of color in that purple seashell down by the chair. And then this panel went on another black card base that I cut to fit, just so that it would show again a little bit of the black border. And that finishes off card number 2. For card number 3, I decided to cut a panel from the piece that came with the kit. I really like this foamy looking water coming up on the beach, and so I decided to use the hello stamp that comes in it, and it looks like, you know, somebody's written it in sand. So of course it's wonderful for this sand looking embossing powder, which is exactly what I did with it. And I put that on this paper and melted it down. I had no problems doing that. It took the heat just fine. The only weird thing was that white, weird little empty space on the card, but I covered that up. I'll show you that later. And really, I didn't even need to cover it up in the end because the card design covered it anyway. But it's one of those things. I just wanted to make sure. Now again, I'm using the footprints to create the sandy appearance of the footprints walking. So I really love the effect of that. Of course, you've seen that on many other videos, but it looks really awesome on that printed paper. Now I'm going to create a frame for my shaker card, and using the same technique basically of ruler and pencil, I've used my mat here to measure a 1/2 inch border around the whole entire piece. And this is an A2 size piece. And once again, I use the ruler and a craft knife to just trim out the center piece so that I have a frame when it's complete. While that's going on, I want to take a minute to thank all of you who commented about my question whether to do 2 videos or 1 when I do the 10 card videos. And it seemed like the 5 cards at a time won, so I'm going to probably do that most of the time. But again, thank you for the great response and all the great comments on my last video. That was wonderful. All right, so getting back to this one now, I've applied 2-sided tape to the back of the frame and then applied a clear acetate window to it. And this is actually clamshell packaging that I recycled. And now I'm applying the panel that I created earlier just directly on the card base. And then here goes all the items that's going to go in the shaker well. I cut out a bunch of starfish. I have some seafoam green sequins and some seed beads here in white and silver. And then I'm going to take my frame, which I had put the double-sided foam tape on, and that's going to go over the top to create the window. And once I had that in place, I shook things around and kind of got things where I wanted it to go. And that finishes off the shaker part of the card. Now I'm creating a sentiment with a flag just out of the same cardstock that I used from the citrus matte stack that looks a little bit like sand. I cut the flag out of one side, stamped it with Life is Better with Sandy Feet using that darkest ink again, and then made a quick little bow to put on there. I attached that with some sticky dot, and I put sticky dots on both the middle and each side of that bow so it would stay where I wanted it, and then finally the orange starfish to go on the top, and it all comes together. So with that, we've finished card number 3. Once again, I'm going to use the citrus matte stack from Die Cuts with a View. I'm going to choose this blue denim paper and a striped piece that has glitter in it. And I'm going to secure a oval that I cut out using one of my dies in my collection. Since I showed you how I stamped the water earlier, I'm not going to show you all the steps in detail this time around, but I am going to use the 3-layer stamp again on the water, starting with the lightest color at the bottom, or the main color, then lining up the second one, and I will use the middle tone cube of ink for that. And then finally the dark tone on top of that to give the final accent there. So I'll go ahead and ink that up and apply it. Now I want this to be a bigger width than the stamp. So I'm going to stamp it again on top of the first layer that I did, or the first level, if you will. And it does look a little wonky because you are stamping right on top of the other one, but this is going to be covered up by my sentiment, so it is not a concern and nothing to worry about. Now I'm going to do my background, or my sky here, because this is going to be a silhouette of a sea scene looking out on the water. And I again use the broken china and just apply that right up to the line of water there, and just a hair over it. You really can't tell that I'm going over it, but it just gives it a nice little glow when I do. And then I'm using again the faded jeans on the top to make the sky look a little bit more dimensional. And what I'm trying to do here is to create either a very early morning scene or a very late dusk scene. I think I decided it must be morning, and I have this little bit of yellow here. This is citron, or twisted citron. It was a little bright, so I did tone it down some. The next thing you're going to see me do is stamp in with black ink the birds from the stamp set. Off camera, I went ahead and stamped and embossed the mermaid and the rock, and went ahead and glued that together. And after I stamped in the birds here, you'll see me bring her out, and I put her on foam tape. This is a sentiment I did also off of camera. It says thinking of you, and that's white heat embossed. And that creates a nice little scene there. Now, so for the main card base, again, I'm pointing out that the citrus matte stack. I'm going to go ahead and apply that to an A2 card base. So, of course, the stripe paper is a little bit trimmed down. I think it's 4 by 5.5. And then I'm going to apply the scene on this card. That black ink dries slowly, so I just was making sure that it wouldn't smear when I turned it over. I'm going to apply all these foam squares as you see here to lift it off that panel, and that almost finishes the card. I just have a few little finishing touches here. I used 2 colors of Nouveau glitter drops. One is called Silver Moon Dust and the other is Dazzling Blue. And this completes this card because it really doesn't need anything else. The striped paper, it has glitter in it, so it stands on its own pretty well without much else. And that is card number 4. So for the last card, I'm using a Cottage Cuts wide frame die to create a frame. It's not A2, but it will suffice for what I'm going to use it for. I stamped some more water, but this time I used the middle and the darkest blue for the first 2 layers, and then I used Hero Arts Unicorn White for the last layer to create kind of foam. I finished off that layer with some clear embossing powder as well. I also stamped some clouds, a dolphin, and a sailboat. And then I both fussy cut and used the dies where appropriate to cut it all out. Next, I took a Derice Clouds embossing folder and embossed my card base front with that and sprayed it with that seafoam green spray. And while that's drying, I'm going to make the rest of my scene card here. So here is that water that I cut out, and I'm going to put a portion of it on my smaller rectangle. And I have put double-sided foam tape on that rectangle, 2 layers in fact, so that it would stand up quite high. I'm going to trim the excess off, and then next I'm going to put in some clouds here. I did the 3 clouds, so I've got one here, the biggest one. Then I'm going to put one on the left, and that one's got 1 layer of foam tape there to make it a little bit more dimensional. And the last smaller cloud has 2 layers of foam tape, so I've got kind of a cloud bank going there. I trimmed the clouds off, but you're going to see at the end that I put them back on. I had extras, so I just applied it over the top of them. I decided that I liked the look of the overhang when I got all said and done. Now here's that frame on 1 layer of foam tape, and I'm going to apply it right to the card base itself. In some ways this would be a pretty card all by itself if you just added a sentiment, but of course I did this panel, which again double layer foam tape, so it stands above the frame. And now I've got a dolphin and my sentiment, which I did off camera using See You Soon. It's a cute little pun there. And I also made some starfish, and I stamped them, heat embossed them using that sand embossing powder for a neat little look. The smallest starfish has, again, more foam to make it stand up a bit more, and that creates a nice little scene. For a little pizzazz, I used some Simply White Nouveau Crystal drops. And here it is after I replaced the clouds. I just glued another layer of clouds over the part that I had cut off, and then with the dolphin, I used glossy accents on that to give it a shine, and that turned out really nicely too. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I hope you got some inspiration from these 5 cards. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, and please do subscribe. I always love your comments too, and I'll be back next month with the July Hero Arts kit and also the Creative Escape paper crafting kit for July. So stay tuned, but until then, keep crafting. Bye!